I remember the moment it all changed. The screeching sound of metal tearing, the violent impact that seemed to twist time itself, and then nothing. Silence, cold, an overwhelming stillness, as though the universe had decided to hold its breath. I had always taken life for granted, rushing from one task to the next, never really stopping to ask if I was living the life I was meant to live. It wasn't until I was no longer living that I had begun to understand what I had been missing. There was no pain at first, no fear, just a strange floating sensation. I found myself detached from my body, looking down at the twisted wreckage below. I felt no sense of urgency, no panic. It was as if time had paused, and in that pause, I explain it. There are no words for the being I encountered. He was calm, full of peace, yet his presence held such power that I couldn't look away. He didn't speak at first. He just watched me, his gaze steady, as though he knew everything about me, every thought, every mistake, every regret. But in his eyes, I felt no judgment. There was no condemnation. There was no understanding. "You have come to the threshold," he said, his voice soft yet filled with a profound authority. "You have crossed over from life to death, but your journey is far from over." His words pierced through me, but I didn't understand. I had been told so many times that death was the end, that everything stopped when the heart stops beating, but this felt different. There was no finality here, no end. There was only a new beginning. "Why am I here?" I asked, my voice a whisper in the stillness. Something I wanted to know for a while now. The figure smiled, a gentle curve of lips that didn't seem forced or practiced. It was the smile of someone who had seen the end and knew what lay beyond it. "You are here because you are not yet ready to die. You have been given a glimpse beyond the veil to show you something more important. You are called to prepare your spirit, your mind, your heart, for what is coming." "What is coming?" I asked, my curiosity overshadowing my fear. The figure's expression grew serious. "The world you once knew is changing. Technology, convenience, control. These things will promise you peace, but they will steal from you what is most precious." He paused, allowing his words to sink in. "And the greatest deception of all is this, the mark of the beast." I had heard of it before, in whispers and warnings from old books and people who spoke of things they feared. I hadn't taken it seriously. After all, it seemed like something distant, a theory, an idea, not something that could touch me. But now, in this otherworldly place, those fears didn't seem so far-fetched. "Technology?" I asked, my voice trembling. "But how? Isn't it supposed to make our lives better?" The figure nodded slowly, his eyes full of understanding. "It will at first. It will bring comfort, security, and the promise of a future where everything is perfect. But that is the trick. It will disconnect you from what matters most. Your spirit, your faith, your connection to the divine." I felt a cold shiver run down my soul. The figure could see through me, right to the deepest parts of my soul. He knew my thoughts, my doubts, and my confusion. "The world will offer you the mark in the name of safety, in the name of progress," he continued. "But it will take away your freedom. It will bind you to a system that will control every aspect of your life, stripping you of your ability to choose, to discern, to live with faith. The mark is not just a physical sign. It is a spiritual one." I didn't fully understand. How could something as simple as technology hold such power? But as I stood there, looking into the figure's eyes, I realized something. He wasn't warning me about something that could happen in the distant future. He was showing me something that was already here. It was happening now, right under our noses. "You must prepare," he said, his voice low and filled with gravity. "Not just for yourself, but for those who will come after you. You must strengthen your faith, build communities that are rooted in love and truth, and learn to live in a way that cannot be controlled by the systems of the world. I wanted to ask so many questions. I wanted to know how to prepare, what steps to take, how to protect myself from this invisible force. But before I could speak, the figure held up Shvid Smut Ibchet, his hand, a signal for silence. Ibchet, the answers will come in time, he said. But for now, listen. And then he showed me something. Visions, rapid and surreal. I saw people being lulled into a false sense of security by promises of convenience. I saw families, once close, now fragmented as technology replaced human connection. I saw individuals willingly accepting the mark, believing it would make their lives easier, not realizing the cost until it was too late. The visions were vivid, terrifying, but more than anything, they were real. The future was unfolding before me, and I could feel the weight of it pressing down on my soul. It wasn't something that could be ignored. It wasn't something I could escape. It was something that had already begun, and I had to be ready. I felt a sudden pull, as though I were being drawn back, pulled away from the light and the figure. The visions began to fade, and the warmth of the light slowly dimmed. "No!" I cried out, wanting to stay, wanting to understand more. But the figure's voice echoed one final time. "You are not ready. Not yet. But when the time comes, you will be." And then, as quickly as it had all begun, I was back in my body, back in the wreckage. But something had changed. I could still feel the figure's presence, still hear his words echoing in my mind. The world around me was the same, yet everything felt different. I had seen beyond the veil, and now I had to decide what I was going to do with the truth that had been revealed to me. The question was no longer if I would prepare. The question was, how? As the days passed, that question lingered, refusing to leave me alone. The answers would come, but not all at once. The journey was only just beginning. The days after the accident blurred together. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong, that my encounter with the divine figure had left me with more questions than answers. There was an unsettled urgency in my chest, a feeling that I was standing on the edge of something vast, something terrifyingly close. It wasn't until one quiet evening, as I sat in the stillness of my living room, that the visions returned. Been alone, or so I thought, when the light appeared again, soft, familiar, like a whisper I couldn't ignore. It wasn't the same as before, not as warm, but it was there, hovering on the edges of my consciousness. And then I felt his presence once more, the divine figure. He didn't need to speak for me to know he was there. His energy wrapped around me like a cloak, pulling me back into the realm I had glimpsed before. I could feel the weight of his gaze, a knowing that extended far beyond anything I had yet encountered. Stu looked at me with a mixture of pity, hope, and a gnawing sense of awful responsibility, weft of cocaine. "Okay, the farmer?" "Come," he said simply. And in that moment, I was no longer in my living room. I was somewhere else. Somewhere different. We were surrounded by a vast cityscape, unlike anything I had ever seen. Towers stretched high, glowing with an unnatural light. The streets were alive, but not with life. People moved in perfect synchronization, their faces expressionless, their eyes distant, as though they were no longer fully aware of their own existence. They walked, but they didn't seem to see each other. "This is the future," the figure said, his voice calm but edged with sorrow. "This is the world that is coming, a world where convenience reigns, where technology has stripped away the need for personal connection." The scene shifted, moving faster than I could fully comprehend. I saw people, families, children, the elderly, gathered in public spaces, all staring at the same screen. A quiet hum filled the air, a constant drone of information. Their faces glowed pale in the artificial light. They weren't talking to each other. They weren't looking at each other. They were connected to something much larger, something invisible but powerful. "This is the first step," he continued. the seduction of the mind, the ease of a connected world. People will believe it's progress. They will believe it's the answer to their problems. But in reality, it will slowly take away their ability to think for themselves. I felt a chill run through me as I watched people of all ages interacting with their devices. It was as if they were no longer individuals, but parts of a larger machine, moving in harmony with it. There was no joy, no laughter, just an overwhelming sense of quiet submission. It was as if they had surrendered their souls to the endless stream of data and convenience. Is this what they will choose? I asked, my voice heavy with disbelief. Will they all fall for it? Yes, the figure replied softly. They will, one small step at a time. The promise of ease, of security, of certainty. They will be told that it is the way to happiness, the way to peace, and they will choose it not because they are evil, but because they are deceived. The vision shifted again, this time to a more personal scene. I saw a man, alone in his apartment. He sat before a glowing screen, his hand reaching for a small device on the table. I could see the faint mark on his hand, nothing overt, just a small, barely noticeable symbol. But there was no mistaking it. It was the beginning. I saw the man's face, calm yet empty. He scanned the device, his eyes flicking over the screen, and with one simple motion, he accepted it, the mark. I didn't know exactly what it was at first, but as I looked deeper into the vision, I realized this was the beginning of the end. The man didn't know what he had done. He didn't understand the cost. The mark seemed like nothing more than a simple transaction, a payment, convenience, a way to link him to everything. His data, his life, everything now held in the system. What is it? I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. What happens to him now? The figure's face darkened, the soft light around us flickering as though dimmed by an unseen hand. The mark will seem harmless at first, a small convenience, a way to ensure your safety, your comfort. People will wear it proudly. But it is more than just a physical mark. It is a spiritual bond. Once accepted, there is no turning back. My heart sank as I tried to process the weight of his words. I could feel the growing danger in the vision, a tightening in my chest as I watched the man's life unfold. He seemed more at peace with each passing day. Everything was easier for him now. But that peace, I realized, was an illusion. It was the calm before the storm. Why? I asked softly. Why does it matter if they accepted? What's the danger in this mark? The mark is the price of control, the figure explained. It binds you to a system that strips away your freedom. It replaces faith with fear, choice with compliance, spirit with the will of the machine. Those who accept it will become enslaved by it, though they may not realize it at first. They will lose the ability to choose, to discern. They will be led like sheep to the slaughter, thinking they are safe. I felt my pulse quicken. But there's still a choice, isn't there? A way to avoid it? The figure's gaze softened, but there was a heaviness in his voice as he replied, yes, there is still a choice, but it will not be easy. The world will pressure you to conform, to accept the convenience, the security, the promise of a better life. And as more people accept the mark, those who refuse will be increasingly isolated. They will be seen as enemies, as threats to the new order. I felt the weight of his words settle in my chest. The urgency, the need to act, was clearer now than ever before. What can we do? I asked, my voice trembling with a mix of fear and determination. How can we prepare? The figure didn't answer directly. Instead, he gave me one last vision. A scene of a community, not connected by technology, but by something deeper. People were working together, building something of substance. They weren't slaves to convenience. They weren't bound by screens. They had each other. They had faith. This, and said softly, my brother is back from Jericho, right? The answer lies, is the way. The answer lies in strengthening your faith, in building relationships that cannot be controlled by the system. When the time comes, those who have prepared will be protected, not by their devices, but by their bond to each other and to the divine. The vision faded as quickly as it had come, leaving me in silence once more. I was back in the quiet of my room, but the weight of what I had just seen hung over me like a storm cloud. The mark was coming, and the world would slowly accept it, not through force, but through the slow erosion of freedom and faith. I could no longer ignore the urgency. I could no longer pretend that this was something that could wait. The time to prepare was now. The days that followed were filled with a strange tension. A quiet hum reverberated in my mind, a constant reminder that the world was changing, and I had been shown a glimpse of what lay ahead. It was as if I had awakened to a reality others couldn't see, and the weight of that knowledge pressed on me like a secret I was not sure how to carry. It wasn't long before I was once again pulled into the visions. This time I found myself standing in the midst of a bustling city, surrounded by people going about their everyday lives. But there was something different now. They seemed more focused, more determined in their movements, as if they were part of something larger. The air was thick, with a hum of activity, but there was a sense of detachment, of being drawn into something without fully understanding what it was. A figure appeared beside me, as calm and composed as ever. He didn't need to say anything at first. I could feel it. A shift, a change in the air. Everything was more tangible now, more urgent. This, he said, is where the deception begins. I looked around, trying to make sense of his words. At first, everything seemed normal. People were smiling, chatting, interacting with one another, and everything appeared to be as it should be in a world of technology and convenience. But then I noticed it, the subtle, almost imperceptible changes. People were carrying small devices that no longer resembled phones or tablets. They were sleek, minimalist, almost a part of them. There was no longer the need to swipe or click. They simply spoke to their devices and it responded. It was as if they had become extensions of the system, inseparable, functioning as one. Oh, notice how it starts, the figure continued, his voice low and measured. It's not a sudden, overwhelming shift. It's gradual, almost imperceptible. People will be told that this is the future, easier, safer, more convenient. The mark will not come as a shock. It will come as an opportunity, a promise of a life made simpler, a life free from worry. The vision shifted, and I saw advertisements, bright, colorful, and full of smiling faces. They all touted the same message: a better world, just a step away. Be part of the future. The voices in the ads were soothing, confident, like a warm embrace promising comfort. Connect to everything. Never worry about forgetting your keys. Never lose your wallet. Never be disconnected again. Everything you need is right here. Hey, everything you need is right here. And that was it. That was how the deception would unfold. It wouldn't come with threats or coercion. It would come wrapped in a shiny package of convenience, of ease, of promises that everything could be easier, better. People would be told they were choosing this path for their own good, for their children's future, for a world that was safer, smarter, more efficient. People won't resist, the figure said, watching my reaction closely. They will see the mark as a way to belong, to fit into a world that is increasingly connected. They will be told it is essential for their survival in the new order. And because the promise of convenience is so powerful, they will willingly accept it, not because they are evil, but because they are deceived. Really? I couldn't believe it at first. How could anyone willingly choose something that would strip away their freedom, their connection to their own soul? But as the figure showed me more, the truth became undeniable. The people who accepted the mark wouldn't see it as a choice between good and evil. They would see it as a choice between fear and safety. The fear of being left behind, of being disconnected from the world that would continue to evolve without them, would drive them to accept something They didn't fully understand. The mark won't come with a loud declaration, the figure continued, as the vision around me shifted again. It will be a series of small steps, each one designed to make you more dependent, more compliant. At first, it will seem like nothing more than an upgrade, a small change, a new convenience. And once it's integrated into your life, it will feel natural, even necessary. I watched as people went through their daily routines, swiping their hands across their devices, linking themselves more and more to the system. They received rewards, benefits, and more access to the things they thought they needed. At first, it was little things, discounts, easier shopping, better health monitoring, but soon they were locked into the system. They could no longer function without it. Their thoughts, their choices, their desires, all shaped by what the system allowed. I saw a mother in one of the visions holding her child's hand as they walked to the park. The child was laughing, but the mother's eyes were on her device, her hand absently guiding her child along. She was connected, but not to her child. She was connected to the system, her thoughts and decisions shaped by the gentle pressure of the mark. That's the real danger, the figure said quietly. Not in the obvious moments, but in the subtle shifts. It's not about a single choice to accept or deny the mark. It's about all the small choices that lead up to it. The way your heart, your mind, your faith will be tested along the way. The visions continued to unfold, each one showing how different groups of people would be targeted in different ways. The elderly would be told they needed the mark for better healthcare, to ensure they wouldn't be forgotten in the system. Parents would be promised security for their children, knowing where they were at all times, controlling everything from school attendance to health. Even the young would be promised a more connected future, a place where everyone could find their tribe, their people. Out. Each of these promises will seem harmless at first, the figure said. But the test of faith will come when people have to choose between the comfort of the mark and the uncomfortable truth of their soul's independence. They will be given a choice, but it will be a false one. The choice will feel like a decision between life and death, but it will be a decision between life and control. I was struck by the gravity of his words. People wouldn't choose the mark because they were evil. They would choose it because they believed it was the only option left. The world would convince them that it was the right choice. They would tell themselves it was for the greater good. Felt a pang of sadness deep in my chest. The world would be full of people who had no idea what they were giving up. No idea that with every small choice they made, they were edging closer to a life that wasn't theirs anymore. A life dictated by forces they couldn't see and couldn't understand. How will they know? I asked, my voice tight with emotion. How can they see the deception? The figure's gaze softened, his tone filled with compassion. They will know through their faith, through their discernment. They must hold on to what cannot be controlled. They must trust in what is beyond the system. Those who stand firm in their belief, those who refuse the mark, will face trials, yes, but they will also be free. They will be protected. Many would even recognize deception before it was too late. The darkness of the visions lingered in my mind, a constant reminder of what I had seen, the slow, insidious pull of the mark, the subtle deceptions that would ensnare so many. But there was a quiet strength within me now, a new resolve taking root in my heart. It was as if the divine figure had planted a seed during our encounter, a seed that had begun to grow, stretching out towards the light of understanding. I sat in the same quiet room where the visions had first begun to unfold, still digesting everything I had learned. It was late, much later than I had intended to stay up, but the weight of the knowledge I carried was so heavy, so urgent, that sleep seemed unnecessary. As if on cue, the light returned, soft, gentle, like a touch that soothed the weariness in my heart. Be something in for heaven, was I? The divine figure stood before me again, his presence filling the room with a calm, unwavering energy. His gaze was compassionate but firm, as though he could see into the very core of my being. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice deep and steady, echoing with a kind of timeless wisdom. I didn't have to ask what he meant. The weight of it all, the danger of the coming times, the choices people would have to make, had left me feeling overwhelmed, yet determined. "I think so," I whispered, unsure of what my next step should be. The figure nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "It is not enough to simply know. You must prepare, not just for yourself, but for others. What you have seen, what you have learned, is not for you alone. It is a message that must be shared, a message that can guide those who are still blind to the path ahead." Shit. Sounds like. I felt a tremor in my chest as I processed his words. Share the message. How could I possibly do that? How could I warn others without being labeled crazy or worse, dismissed entirely? The world I lived in was so deeply immersed in technology, in convenience, in the false security it promised. How could anyone see the danger before it was too late? "You must begin with the foundation," the figure said, as if reading my thoughts. "You must build within yourself the strength to stand firm, for you cannot offer something you do not have. Strengthen your faith. Nourish your soul. The first step in preparing for the world to come is preparing yourself spiritually." The weight of his words settled over me like a cloak, heavy but necessary. I had always considered myself a believer, but now I realized that belief wasn't enough. My faith needed to be more than just a passive acceptance. It needed to be active, vibrant, a living force that could withstand the winds of change. The world would test me, challenge me, and I had to be ready for that. "Strengthen your faith through prayer," the figure continued, his voice softening with love. "Through quiet moments of reflection and connection with the divine. You will need it, more than you can imagine. The coming days will be filled with doubt, with confusion. People will wonder if they made the right choice, if they are on the right path. Your faith will be your anchor." I nodded slowly, the weight of the responsibility pressing into my chest. Faith, reflection, prayer. These were simple concepts, but I now saw their depth, their power, in a way I'd never had before. "Once your faith is rooted," he continued, "you must turn outward. You must build community, for no one will survive alone. The world will become more divided as the mark spreads, and those who resist will find themselves isolated, even persecuted. But there is power in community, in those who share the same values, the same faith." A figure's words struck a chord deep within me. I had always believed in the power of connection, but now I saw it in a new light. The future would not be a time for individualism or isolation. It would be a time for unity, for working together, for creating small sanctuaries of hope and strength, communities where people could support each other, protect each other, and help one another through the trials ahead. Number 3, void. "You must begin building these communities now," he urged. "Find those who are open, those who can see the truth in their hearts. Gather together in prayer, in reflection, in preparation. Share the lessons you have learned so that when the time comes, you will not be caught unaware. These communities will be your strength when the world grows dark." The task seemed daunting, even overwhelming. I could see how the world around me was increasingly disconnected, driven by technology, by convenience, by the desire for safety and comfort. How could I convince people to step away from that, to turn their attention to what truly mattered? Oh, I did. The figure seemed to read my hesitation. "You do not need to convince everyone," he said, his voice kind but firm. "The truth will resonate with those who are ready to hear it. You must focus on those who are willing to listen, who are still open to the possibility that something greater exists beyond the confines of technology. The rest will follow when the time comes." So I absorbed his words, a sense of peace beginning to replace my uncertainty. It wasn't about changing everyone's mind. It was about reaching those who still had the capacity to see, to understand, to believe. Start with the willing, build the foundation of faith, and the rest will follow. A few of the guards gave a nonchalant answer. There was no flash to display anything more than their own lives or own bodies. "The rest will follow in time, sir," a smiling face said. "Is your light bright?" "There is one more thing," the figure said, his voice taking on a tone of finality. "Prepare practically. This world will not just test you spiritually. It will test you in every other way as well. You must be self-sufficient, capable of surviving without the convenience of the system. Learn practical skills. Farming, cooking, shelter building. Learn to rely on each other, not on the devices that will enslave you. The time will come when these skills will be more valuable than gold." The words hit me like a sudden revelation. I had thought only in terms of spiritual preparation, of inner strength. But the divine figure was showing me that practical knowledge would be just as crucial. The system would strip away our ability to fend for ourselves, to live in harmony with the earth, to be self-reliant. Those who held these skills would be the ones to survive, to thrive when the world fell into chaos. "You are not alone in this," he said, his gaze softening with compassion. "You are part of a greater plan. The message you carry is not just yours. It is shared by all who are awake to the truth. You must share it with others, help them prepare, and together you will weather the storms that lie ahead." With those final words, the light began to fade, and the vision slipped away. I was left alone in the quiet room once more, but I was no longer the same. My heart was filled with clarity, with purpose. The path ahead would not be easy. It would be filled with challenges, with hardships, with doubts. But I now understood what I had to do. I had to prepare, not just for myself, but for those around me. I had to strengthen my faith, build a community, and prepare practically for the days ahead. And when the time came, I would share these lessons with others. Because the truth was clear now. The world would change. It was inevitable. But I would be ready. We would be ready. The weight of everything I had learned, everything I had seen, hung heavy in the air around me. The world that awaited was daunting, more uncertain, more dangerous, and more deceptive than I could have ever imagined. Yet in the midst of that overwhelming darkness, I now felt something else stirring inside me. A quiet flicker of hope, a certainty that this journey was not one of despair, but of transformation. As the figure's presence began to fade, I found myself standing alone in the quiet space I had come to know so well. It was as if time had ceased to exist. No sound, no movement, only a profound stillness. But this time there was something different. It wasn't just the sense of finality that had been growing throughout our conversations. It was the feeling of peace, deep, unwavering, the kind that came not from ignorance of the trials to come, but from the knowledge that I was not walking this path alone. Oh, there's so much to be grateful for in the destiny. The figure appeared before me once more, his silhouette glowing with the same soft, divine light that had bathed me since the beginning. But this time, there was a quiet joy in his expression, a sense of reassurance. "I know what you're thinking," he said, his voice as gentle as a breeze. "The future may seem dark, but that darkness is not the end. It is only the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter where those who stand firm in their faith will become beacons of light in the storm." I felt a surge of warmth in my chest, an emotion so powerful that it almost overwhelmed me. But the world, it feels like it's spiraling out of control. People will fall for the mark. They'll choose convenience over faith, security over truth. The figure nodded solemnly. "Yes. Many will be led astray, and the world will grow darker, but the darkness cannot last forever. It is in the darkest of times that the light shines brightest, and those who choose to walk in faith will become the flame that others can follow." The thing is, I closed my eyes, absorbing his words. It was true. The world's descent into confusion and chaos could feel like an insurmountable force, one that would leave no room for the light of truth. But somehow, in the quiet corners of my heart, I understood that faith wasn't about the absence of darkness. It was about knowing that the light was always there, even if it wasn't visible at the moment. Faith is not a passive thing. The figure continued, his voice filling the silence with a quiet power. It is active. It is a force that sustains, guides, and transforms. When the world is at its lowest, when people feel lost and hopeless, it is those who carry the light of faith who will lift them up. And that light, no matter how small, will never be extinguished. Anyhow, opened my eyes, feeling a renewed sense of purpose stirring within me. What do I do now? I asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. What could I possibly do in the face of such overwhelming challenges? How could I share this message, this truth, with a world that seems so lost? You have already begun, sir, the figure said, his eyes kind and steady. The journey is not about grand gestures, but small, consistent acts of faith. It begins with you, with your own commitment to live the truth you've learned. It grows through your connection to others, through your willingness to share this knowledge and to help others see the light. I felt a deep sense of responsibility take root within me. This wasn't just about surviving the future. It was about helping others find their way through it. My mission was clear now. It wasn't enough to know. I had to live it, embody it, and share it. I had to be a living example of the hope I had seen, a witness to the power of faith, even in the midst of uncertainty. The figure placed his hand on my shoulder, his touch warm, grounding. Remember this. No matter how dark the world becomes, there is always the possibility of revival. There is always the chance for salvation, because salvation is not something given by the world. It is something that comes from within, from the heart of those who remain faithful, who hold on to the divine and trust that, in the end, love will triumph. This is Weiss, the king of Godstone. Hey, someone. His words resonated deeply within me, touching something far deeper than just intellect. It was as if a hidden door had opened within my heart, allowing me to see the world differently, not as a place of inevitable collapse, but as a place where new life could spring forth, even from the harshest of circumstances. And so I left by a biplane. There were lights lit everywhere. There was such peace. You must be the change you seek, he added softly. Your faith will be tested, yes, but you must stand firm, for in your strength, others will find their own. And just like that, the room around me began to shift, the divine presence slowly fading, leaving only a quiet, profound peace behind. I knew that this was not the end of the journey, but the beginning of something far greater. The vision had ended, but the lessons would stay with me, carved into the deepest part of my soul. I wasn't just a witness to what would come. I was called to be a part of it, to carry the message of faith, of community, of hope into a world that desperately needed it. As I stood there, feeling the weight of the moment settle within me, the figure's final words echoed in my mind. No matter how dark the world becomes, there is always the possibility of revival. End lyrics from... I was suddenly filled with a clear, unshakable certainty. No matter how bleak the future appeared, no matter how many would choose the easy path over the difficult one, the truth would remain. Faith, community, and love were eternal forces, not defined by the chaos of the world, but by something far greater. And with this understanding, I knew that I was ready to return to life, ready to face whatever came next with a heart full of purpose, a mind full of clarity, and a soul strengthened by the knowledge that the light could never be fully extinguished. Any thoughts? As the vision faded completely and I felt myself pulled back into the physical world, I was no longer the same person who had first stepped into this journey. I had returned with a renewed mission, to live out the truth I had been shown, to guide others with love and compassion, and to be a beacon of light in a world that was about to grow dark. Thanks. The future would be uncertain, it would be difficult, but it was also full of possibility. Because faith, even in the darkest times, always has the power to ignite a revival. And I was ready to help carry that light.